Pero bueno, primero que nada, les agradecemos a todos por estar aquí. Bienvenidos al evento Sunrise from the West, Progress Toward the Clean Energy Future con David Hochschild. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos. Él es comisionado de Energía del Estado de California, nos acompaña en representación del gobernador Jerry Brown. También me gustaría agradecer la presencia de David Madero, director general del Centro Nacional de Gas, Ernesto Ríos, director general del Instituto Mexicano del Petróleo, los comisionados Marcelino Madrigal y Guillermo Zúñiga de la Comisión Reguladora de Energía, Luis Alfonso Muñoz Cano Álvarez, director general adjunto de Energía Renovable en representación del subsecretario Leonardo Beltrán de la Secretaría de Energía. Me da mucho gusto poder presentar a los integrantes del Presidium. Contamos con la participación del doctor Luis Serra, quien es el director ejecutivo de la Iniciativa de Energía del Tecnológico de Monterrey. Él nos acompaña también como moderador en la sesión de preguntas y respuestas. El doctor Luis Serra hizo su doctorado en Economía por la Universidad de Warwick, es director ejecutivo de la Iniciativa de Energía del Tecnológico Monterrey en la Escuela de Gobierno y Transformación Pública. Previamente fue director de investigación en SIDAC. En 2014 fue distinguido como uno de los 100 líderes más influyentes del sector energético en México por la revista Petróleo y Energía, y también se desempeñó como consejero editorial en Energía para Reforma. Es miembro del Foro para la Competitividad de las Energías Renovables en el Instituto Global para la Sostenibilidad del EGADE, Business School en el Tecnológico Monterrey, y miembro del Consejo para el Monitoreo de los Indicadores de Desarrollo para el Gobierno del Estado de Jalisco. Ha trabajado en la Secretaría de Gobernación y ha sido asistente de investigación en la Universidad Complutense de Madrid, así como asistente de investigación y docencia en la Universidad de Warwick y catedrático en diplomados en la Universidad de las Américas en Puebla y del Tecnológico de Monterrey. Bienvenido, Luis, gracias por acompañarnos. Asimismo, tenemos la presencia de nuestro invitado de honor, David Hochschild, quien fue nombrado comisionado de Energía por el gobernador del Estado de California, Jerry Brown, en febrero del 2013. El comisionado tiene a su cargo el área especializada en medio ambiente dentro de la comisión, donde también se tienen otras 4 áreas especializadas en ingeniería, ciencias físicas, economía y derecho. La primera vez que se involucró en el campo de la energía solar fue en 2001 en San Francisco, como asistente especial del alcalde Willie Brown, donde puso en marcha una iniciativa destinada a colocar paneles solares en edificios públicos para toda la ciudad. Se desempeñó como director ejecutivo de un consorcio nacional de los principales fabricantes de energía solar y trabajó durante 5 años en Solaria, una empresa de energía solar en Silicon Valley. Entre el 2007 y 2008 fue comisionado de la Comisión de Servicios Públicos de San Francisco. El comisionado Hochschild ha sido galardonado por su trabajo en energía limpia con el Sierra Club's Trailblazer Award, the American Lung Association Clean Air Hero Award y el Department of Energy Million Solar Roof True Champion Award. Hochschild cuenta también con una maestría por la Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Sin más preámbulo, les agradeceré, le den una cordial bienvenida al comisionado Mr. Hochschild. The floor is all yours.
Well, buenas tardes, good afternoon, thank you for joining, and let me also just begin by thanking all my gracious hosts this week. It's my first time to Mexico City, and I've just been so impressed with all the people I've met throughout the city. We've been meeting with CRE and with CFE and with Sener and a number of clean energy companies here. And I want to especially acknowledge my colleagues, the commissioners here, who I regard you as being sort of a sister agency. And Commissioner Madrigal and Commissioner Zuniga, could you please stand up? I want to just thank you for your service to Mexico. Yeah. Before I begin my talk, I want to actually apologize to the people of Mexico for Donald Trump. And yeah. No, I'm actually quite serious about that. Donald Trump does not speak for the United States. He certainly doesn't speak for the people of California. He wants to build a wall, and we want to build a bridge with you, okay? That's what most American people want. And so I want to assure you he is not going to be the next president of the United States, okay? And I believe that after this election is over, we're going to move together forward to a cleaner, healthier future. And I think the bridge between our two countries is actually clean energy and building a cleaner future that we can be proud of for our children. Okay, so to me, Donald Trump is a distraction, and he will soon be gone from the political stage. So I just wanted to begin by sharing that, and I know many people in my state share that sentiment. So, all right. So I want to begin here with this vision of our two states, California and Mexico, building a clean energy future together, because I think this is actually the most exciting moment in energy in history. Okay, and so to start off with, I think the choice. Mexico has a choice to make, right? Do you want the future on the left or do you want the future on the right? And it is a choice, and it is a decision that you make. And the opportunity is huge. And I want to tell a story. I started in the energy industry maybe 15 years ago. When I went to a conference, I was curious about coal, because I've always been bothered by coal, very dirty fuel. And I met a guy at this conference in the coal industry, and he told me, don't listen to renewable energy people. They don't know what they're talking about. Coal is going to be our fuel for the next 1,000 years. Okay, that's what he told me. Yeah, well, let me show you something. So the story of coal is very different from that. Coal used to power the British Empire, right? So the entire British Empire depended on coal. Germany fought and waged 2 world wars because of coal, right? Coal has powered the United States. It has powered India, it's powered China, okay, and that is changing. This is what's happened to coal in the United States. So in 2011, coal was the largest source of electricity generation. It was the majority. Am I speaking too fast? Is this okay? All right, so coal was the majority of our electricity generation in 2011. And most of that coal came from 4 companies: Peabody, Arch, Alpha, and Cloud Peak Energy. And so their combined market cap has fallen since then by 99%, okay? These companies are worth 1% of what they were worth in 2011. 3 of those 4 companies are bankrupt today. The majority of coal mines and coal assets in the United States are held today by companies in bankruptcy. This is the beginning of the end of the coal era, all right? So I think we should all have a sense of great possibility for how quickly this change can happen. And if you look here in the United States, last year, renewable energy was the majority of new generation that was built, okay? So, and we define renewable energy does not include natural gas. Renewable energy is wind, solar, geothermal, hydro, and biomass. Okay, that was the majority, right? So we're building this new future together. In California, we're engaged in what I'd call a grand experiment, okay, to build aggressively and quickly a clean energy future. And here's what's happened. As our GDP has gone up, at the same time our population has gone up, and the critics said, okay, there's no way to do this and bring your emissions down. But actually what happened is our emissions have gone down, and our emissions per capita have gone down quite steeply. So this has been a success story, and it's working. And I think, let me just one more on this, which is that there's basically 3 myths that the critics put out there. They said, okay, California, if you go do this crazy clean energy experiment, it's going to crash your economy. Okay, that's what they said. The economy in California has grown faster than the national average. Okay, so that was a myth that said it's going to drive unemployment up. Okay, well, what's happened? We've cut unemployment in half the last 5 years. And then finally they said there's going to be blackouts. Your electric grid can't handle it. We've had no blackouts, right? Statewide blackout. It has not happened because of renewable energy. So there were a lot of myths that have now been debunked, okay? So I got into renewable energy. In 1997, I worked for President Nelson Mandela in South Africa. And one of the first things that the ANC government did when they came to power was they provided postal service, essentially for people to mail letters and packages in the townships, because the people living in the townships had never had that before. And the postal stations were covered with solar, and they had batteries, and they were lit up at night. So I was living in a black township in the Eastern Cape, and this was the main feature of the community. People would gather there. And I got excited about the potential of solar power in particular to grow rapidly. And the more I looked into it, I learned every time demand, global demand for solar energy doubles, the price goes down by 20%. And I got excited about the vision of helping take solar energy from being the smallest source of electricity generation in the world to the largest source of electricity generation in the world in our lifetime. Okay, and that vision has remained. That's what I still think we're on track to do. So I went on to work for the mayor in San Francisco. And actually, we did have blackouts in 2001. Had nothing to do with renewable energy. That was because of Enron doing market manipulation. And with every crisis, there is an opportunity, right? And so we put on the ballot for people to vote on as a referendum a $100 million bond to pay for solar panels on public buildings and energy efficiency. So on the bottom right, that's our large convention center, the Moscone Center. That's the main convention center in San Francisco. The bottom left is the San Francisco airport, all powered by solar. The city hall is powered by solar panels on the roof and the reservoir. And then we shut down 2 polluting power plants in San Francisco. So I want to talk a little bit about federal subsidies for energy, because I think it's important to discuss this. We have basically heavily subsidized fossil fuels. And, you know, there's fundamentally 3 differences from how subsidies for fossil fuels, for coal and natural gas and oil, work versus renewable energy. The subsidies for fossil fuel are much more numerous, okay? There's many more of them. And they've been around much longer. So like the oil depletion allowance, which is a subsidy for oil, started in 1926. And these subsidies don't expire, so they just go on. They continue in perpetuity. The subsidies for wind, for solar, for renewables, they've only been around the last 10, 15 years, and they expire, right? So what's happening in California and in New York and other states that are pushing on renewable energy, those states are basically trying to level the playing field from what's been done wrong, I think, at the federal level, all right? I'm going to skip this. Okay, I want to just tell the story of the iPhone, because I think it's important to remember, you know, we should all have a sense of great possibility for how quickly new technology can be introduced and adopted on a really wide scale. Raise your hand in the audience today if you have an iPhone. Okay, look around. That's almost everybody, okay? So this technology did not exist 10 years ago. And if you think about it, you know, what it's a computer and a calendar and a stopwatch, a calculator and a flashlight and a camera and a map and a tape recorder and a notebook, video games, watch, camera, music, you know, video camera, and also a phone, by the way. So, but this year, Apple will manufacture its 1 billionth iPhone, 1 billion iPhones, for something that didn't exist 10 years ago. And so when we think about energy, I think we need to retain that sense of possibility for how quickly true change can come. Because I think we always underestimate how quickly a change can happen, right? And this is another example. AT&T did a study in 1980 asking about what would the global market be for cell phones in the year 2000. And they said 900,000 cell phones. And in fact, in 2000, there were 109 million. And then today, there's 7 billion cell phones, right? So these things can happen very, very fast. In California, this is what's happening. We started off with a law that said to all our utilities, you have to buy 20% of your electricity from renewable energy sources by 2013. And the utilities said, oh, the sky's going to fall, disaster, we can't do it. Then we did it. And so then we raised the standard to 33% by 2020, and now we're fully contracted to do that. And then just 6 months ago, the governor signed the law that mandates 50% renewable energy by 2030. And again, that's solar, wind, geothermal, biomass, and small hydro, okay? And we have now installed more renewable energy than any other state in the United States. Texas is second because of wind. They've done a great job of wind in Texas. And I like to tell this story of Roger Bannister, who was the first person to run 1 mile in less than 4 minutes. And that was a feat that people said the human body is not capable of doing that. But this is 1954. But as soon as he did it, 6 weeks later, the next person broke the record again, right? And so what we think is impossible is possible. And then the same thing is happening with the price of solar power. In California, we broke the 4 cents a kilowatt hour for solar power cost level. And of course, as the price of solar goes down, the market goes up. I want to tell you a little story too about, so I work at the California Energy Commission, and this year is our 40th anniversary. And I want to tell you the story of what happened, because 40 years ago, we had an energy crisis in California. Electric demand was growing by 8% a year. And so the state legislature commissioned the Rand Corporation to look at this question: what should we do? How do we respond to this? And they did a study, they said, we want to build 40 nuclear plants. That's the answer, build 40 nuclear plants. So we have an 800-mile coastline. That would be 1 nuclear plant every 20 miles along the California coast. Legislature said, no way, we're going to go a different direction. They created the Energy Commission, and with 2 goals: one, to push on renewable energy, and the other was energy efficiency. So we set standards for all new buildings. When you build a new building in California, you have to build it with energy efficient lighting, with energy efficient windows, with insulation. And this is what happened. The red line shows energy use of the United States. The blue line is California. And in the mid-'70s, we created these energy standards. This is what happened. We got savings from industrial, commercial, and residential energy use. And today, we're using half the energy per capita compared to the rest of the country. So it's a real success story, I think, for setting a policy. And that means many, many fewer power plants, right? Same thing for appliances. So we did refrigerators, all right, in the mid-'70s. That was the first appliance that we regulated. We said, and that's in your house, that's usually the appliance that uses the most energy. The refrigerator industry said, no, don't do it. We're going to go out of business. We'll leave the state. So we said, nope, you have to meet this standard. Otherwise, you can't sell your refrigerators in California. So we basically cut the use. And this is what happened. The energy use went down. At the same time, the price of the refrigerator went down, and the size of the refrigerator went up. So you end up with refrigerators that are much more efficient, that are cheaper to buy, and that are bigger. And it's a good example, again, of a long-term government policy that can really be a win-win. And the same thing, we just did televisions in 2009. We set a standard. We told the TV industry, you can't sell any televisions to our 40 million residents of California unless you meet this very strict energy efficiency requirement. And the TV industry said the same thing that the refrigerator industry said. But we did the standard, and now that saves $1 billion a year for California customers. It cut the energy use in half. Same thing for plug-in charger devices, like all your cell phones that you're talking about, plug-in shavers. Up until 2012, you plug that device into the wall, and when it's fully charged, it would still use a little bit of electricity. Why? There's a 25-cent shut-off diode that the manufacturer could install to fix that problem, but they don't install it because they don't pay the energy bill. We pay the energy bill. So we said, no, you can't sell your product to our state unless you put in that 25%. So that saves $300 million a year, right? This is a chart from the US Department of Energy that shows the cost trends in wind, in distributed solar PV, in utility scale solar PV, in battery storage, and in LEDs. And these are what I would call the foundational technologies for a clean energy future. And the good news is that the cost trends are all going the right direction. Very, very steep declines in all those technologies. In California with renewable energy, I want to just show you how quickly the transformation is happening. In 2008, there was only 12% renewable energy in California, and today we're over 25%, right? So moving very fast. I'll take you on a California clean energy tour. So you can see some of these projects we're putting in. This is the largest thin film solar PV project in the world. So I dedicated this project last year. It's called Desert Sunlight. It's just north of the Mexico border. It's 550 megawatts. This was installed just last year, and there was all of this innovation. A lot of learning actually happens in the construction of the project. For example, this site was all graded, which means they had a bulldozer that just leveled the ground. That's very expensive to do that. That's actually 15% of the project cost. And they actually figured out how to avoid doing that in the future. So there's cost savings there. The solar panels on the southern end of this field, they all had a frame around them. And halfway through the project, they figured out how to get rid of the frame. So big cost savings there. The efficiency, this is a fixed tilt system, so the panels don't move, they're fixed. In the solar industry, you generate 25% more power when you're on a tracker and you follow the sun, but the efficiency of the solar panel has to be high enough to justify that cost of the tracker. So halfway through this project, they got the efficiency up to now where they're doing trackers, right? So all this innovation happened even over the course of the construction of this one project. This is at the time this was built, this was the largest silicon solar project in the world. It's now the third largest because China's built some bigger ones. So that last project I showed you was First Solar, which is an American company. This is SunPower. And the largest project in the world is this one in China. This is 1.2 gigawatts. And interesting story, I was in the solar industry 10 years ago in 2004 when the whole global solar market passed 1 gigawatt. So the amount of solar panels that were manufactured in 1 year passed 1 gigawatt. Now, this one project is bigger than the entire global market. So that's what's happening. This is the Ivanpah project. Has anyone been to Las Vegas? Here are a few people. Yeah, you see this if you fly out of the Las Vegas airport. So this is what you're looking at. There are 3 550-foot towers with a boiler on top of the tower, and they're surrounded by 173,000 mirrors. The sunlight comes down, hits the mirror, it focuses the light on the top of the tower and brings it to temperature. At the time this project won the contract, this was equal in price to solar PV, to photovoltaics, but now the price of solar PV has been cut in half. And so this technology is not being built very much anymore, but that's the largest of its kind in the world. And this is the largest solar thermal trough power plant in the world, 350 megawatts. And this actually is not new. This is 30 years old and still going very strong. So a real example, I think, of the durability of renewable energy, how long this technology can last. And we also have the world's largest geothermal power plant. This is about 1 gigawatt in size near Napa. And then also the world's largest wind project, the Alta Wind Energy Center, also in California, and biomass as well. So in virtually every clean energy technology category, California now has the largest project in the world, and it's working. And there's another example too. All forms of energy generation, including renewable energy, have an impact on the environment. But one good trend we're seeing is we're starting to reduce some of that impact. So this project used to have 432 of the small turbines that had that metal structure, the lattice structure. The birds would come land on that, and then the blades move very fast, so it would impact the birds. And so they repowered this site, which means they removed all 432 of the small turbines, and they put in just 34 of the new turbines, which have a solid steel column, and the blades move much slower. And that actually tripled the energy production. They got 3 times more energy, and it cut the bird kill by 70%. So big success story there. In new construction, California builds about 100,000 new homes every year. And I operate a program where we provide cash incentives to the home builders to encourage them to build with solar and do it right the first time. So now in Southern California, 27% of the new homes are being built with solar included. And as a result of all this, there are now more solar industry employees in California than all of the utility employees combined, our publicly owned utilities and our investor-owned utilities. And the jobs are growing very quickly. The solar jobs in California are projected to go to 90,000 by the end of this year. And this just shows the different technologies. wind, solar thermal, solar PV, geothermal. The biggest change you can see there is that tan band in the middle, and that's solar PV. And so we're expecting that to be close to half of all the renewable energy that's bought in California, just because the cost is so low now. And some cities have gotten out in front of this. Lancaster, California, and now San Francisco as well, have required solar on new construction, so you can't build a new building anywhere without having solar on it. We have 1 million solar systems in the US, about half of those are in California. And this is our latest solar customer is President Obama. On the left is the solar roof he just put on the White House, and on the right is the solar roof that Governor Jerry Brown put on the governor's mansion in Sacramento. The largest manufacturing plant in California today is an electric vehicle factory. So this is Tesla, and they employ 12,000 people. They're growing very fast. We have about 200,000 electric vehicles in California. And I would argue there's a nice natural synergy between electric vehicles and renewable energy because, while geothermal and biomass can operate 24 hours a day, wind and solar are intermittent. And so when you have surplus generation, you have some flexibility about when and how you charge your electric vehicle fleet. And so I think these two technologies, electric vehicles and renewable energy, complement each other very well. And that's part of a larger trend of electrifying almost everything. So these are some companies we've funded. On the top left is a bus company called Proterra. They make a battery electric bus. It has a 100-mile range, and it recharges in 20 minutes. That's a battery electric motorcycle. And then on the bottom right is the new Tesla Model 3. It took me, that just got introduced about 3 weeks ago. It took me 1 week to convince my wife to allow me to put the deposit down for that car. But during that week, 300,000 people signed up ahead of me. So now I'm very far back in the line waiting for the car. And this is an electric bike. So I just bought this bike. I'm a really slow biker. I'm the last person you want in a bike race. And I had my daughter on the bike with me. I got, one of those attachments. You can put your kid on the back. And I was biking up this hill. And there was a guy, I'm sure you have people like this in Mexico, who they wear the matching outfit. They look like they're racing the Tour de France. Yeah, so this guy's going up the hill, but I passed him with my kid because he didn't know I had an electric bike, so it felt great. Okay, yeah, and then I was going to say also, in new construction, we're seeing some trends now of home builders building homes with no gas line. So it's all electric, so all the appliances are electric. And that saves about $4,500, which is the avoided cost of not having to run a gas line to the house and not having to pipe the gas inside. This is a company called City Ventures in Los Angeles that's building that. So I like to make the analogy to the rest of the new economy. The whole week I've been here, we've been taking Uber everywhere just to get around. So Uber was a company founded in San Francisco. I mean, it didn't exist, 6 years ago or so. And now it's one of the fastest growing companies in the world. Same thing with Airbnb. And you ask the question, okay, what defines the new economy? It's a decentralized business model, for one thing. So Uber depends on the smartphone, right? So no smartphone, no Uber, right? Technology-based approach. And they're growing very rapidly. And there's very strong resistance from the incumbents, from the taxi companies, from the hotels. And I think the same thing is true with renewable energy technologies. So I think it's a very appropriate analogy. But one of the exciting things, too, we're seeing a lot of the leadership in the technology world in California have committed now to do 100% renewable. So Google's doing 100%. Facebook's doing 100% renewables. Apple is doing 100%, not just for their facilities in California and in the United States. They're going way upstream. They're building solar and wind projects in China to power the Foxconn factory where the iPhone is made, right? So I just look at some of the other technologies that I think could define the clean energy future. On the top left is a company that makes it's called View. They make the window of the future, which is a window that you can control the tint of the window. So you can adjust it from completely dark to completely light. and that actually saves, reduces your heat gain in a building and saves about 20% of your energy bill. The Eiffel Tower now has a wind turbine inside it, that cylindrical wind turbine, and even pipes in the water system and the wastewater system. They have systems now where they generate electricity inside the pipe from the movement of the water. So all these are part of the clean energy future that's coming. In California, also, we have great cooperation with the military. So we have 30 military bases around the state, and the Navy is actually doing a particularly good job. They've committed to do 50% renewable energy by 2020. Remember, our state goal is 50% by 2030, so they're actually ahead of the state. And we're also, as I mentioned, building high-speed rail. So this will be 100% powered by electricity, and 100% of that electricity is coming from renewable energy sources. And just again, a sense of how quickly this can happen. As a reminder, it took General Motors. General Motors is one of the most famous, long-time leaders in the American economy. It took them over a century to become a $50 billion company. Again, Tesla started in 2003, and they're already, 3/4 of the way there. And you can just play this out over the next few years, and you see where this is going. Tesla is going to be more valuable than General Motors, right? So I want to just close with a few success stories, because I believe when you face a challenge like climate change, or even the pollution problem in Mexico City, it can seem overwhelming. It can seem unsolvable. And at some level, you can lose hope. Okay? So it's very important to remember the other big environmental challenges that we have already solved. Okay? And I mentioned this story of acid rain. So in the United States, in the 70s, in the Midwest, all these dirty coal-burning power plants in Ohio and so on, to help with their local air pollution problem, their solution was build higher smokestacks. Okay, so that just got the pollution up in the jet stream, and then it came down on the east coast of the United States in upstate New York. So I grew up in the summers. I learned how to swim and fish in the Adirondack Park, which is the largest state park in the U.S. My grandfather lived there, and I would go every summer, and I loved it. And acid rain started coming down, and there were 1,500 lakes in this park, and they started to die. So fish could not survive because it was too acidic. So then George Bush Sr. in 1990 signed legislation to reduce acid rain emissions, and this is what happened. It actually fixed the problem, and so they restricted the SOx emissions, and now those lakes in the Adirondacks are coming back to life, and fish life is being restored. And the same thing happened with the ozone hole. If you remember the story of the ozone hole, these chlorofluorocarbons, which were this pollutant was causing a hole in the ozone layer and exposing us all to a greater risk of cancer. And then the world came together in 1987 and signed the Montreal Protocol, which eliminated that pollutant. And now we're on track for the ozone hole to completely restore by 2050. But the story that I think is most analogous to where we are now with renewable energy and fossil fuels is the story of smoking in the United States. So in World War II, we gave cigarettes for free to every soldier as part of their daily rations. So they got food, they got chocolate, they got cigarettes. So a generation of men came home from World War II smoking. And smoking, Johnny Carson smoked on The Tonight Show, Fred Flintstone smoked in the cartoons. Doctors actually did advertisements for cigarettes. Our President Kennedy smoked, and Marilyn Monroe smoked. And then the truth came out that, hey, smoking causes cancer, and secondhand smoke causes cancer. Even if it's not you smoking, the guy next to you is smoking, you can still get cancer from that. And it's very interesting what the response of the tobacco industry was, because they didn't say, oh, that's the truth, we'll stop doing this, we'll make something else. They went from making one product, cigarettes, to making two products, cigarettes and doubt. They manufactured doubt. So they put $100 million into junk science to come up with alternative explanations of why all these people were getting lung cancer. It was from indoor air pollution or something else other than cigarettes. So, but this is the lesson from that. What ended up happening is that delayed, but did not stop the truth from getting out, that cigarettes cause cancer. And when it did, there was this whole cascade of public policies, starting with health warnings on the packages and then banning advertisement on TV and cigarette tax doubling, banning smoking on airplanes and sales to minors, and banning smoking in bars and restaurants, and so on and so forth. And the smoke, we went from almost half the country smoking to today we're down to 15%, and it's falling. So it's really one of the biggest success stories in American history for public health. So I think the same thing will happen with this debate on climate change and with renewables versus fossil fuels. And just in closing, I want to remind everybody there is in San Francisco coming up this Clean Energy Ministerial, which is a big opportunity. The world's coming together in actually next month. And I think it's building on the momentum that the Pope really started with the encyclical on climate change. And I think we do well to listen to his message to us to take care of our environment for the future generations. So I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Is it working? It is working. Well, thank you, David, and on behalf of Dr. Alejandro Poré, we're very glad that you could join us in this evening. And before going into the debate or having some chat with our audience, I would like to ask you two things, because when you are the moderator, you always have that privilege of being the first that ask that question. And I was very interested when you mentioned that rapid technological change, which is one of the things that as a School of Government we're very interested in. And if I'm not mistaken, that technological change has always occurred to us in terms of, for example, the first engine being created, and then 20 years after we have Henry Ford delivering this production model that pretty much changed the whole industry in terms of automobiles. And now the question is, how is it that when you're talking about other technological changes such as Uber itself, and I was thinking that as a regulator, how is it that you can actually anticipate those changes to actually not stop that technological change from occurring and actually facilitating the table for consumers to actually reap off the benefits of that technological change?
That's a great question. I think that in many ways, policy is always chasing technology in some sense, but in my conversations with my Mexican counterparts this week, I've urged them to learn from our mistakes as much as our successes, because we've made a lot of mistakes as well. One of the early mistakes we made in California was we want clean energy. That's the goal. We want a lot of clean energy. And we had only very short-term policies. So we'd have money for 1 year. Okay, we'll do a bunch of incentives for electric cars or solar panels or efficiency, and then it stops. And what we learned is that doesn't work. You've got to have a long-term policy. You have to set a bold goal, and then you have to provide total certainty to the industry. So the first law I showed you there, mandating 20% renewable energy by 2013, then it got raised to 33% by 2020, and now 50% by 2030. That works, and what's happened as a result of setting these long-term goals is that it's unlocked a lot of investment. So California has now received more clean tech venture capital than all of Europe and all of China combined. And I think if there's one lesson, it's set a bold goal and have it be a long-term goal, and be willing to stand up to the critics. There's going to be a lot of critics, big industry, whether it's the steel industry or cement industry, who are reluctant, and you should expect that. That's you're never going to get a consensus. But the difference now, I think, for Mexico, I'm very excited for the future of Mexico. I think you guys, in some ways, it's the most exciting time because it's just getting going now. You have this big opportunity with the energy reform. But the difference now is that Mexico has examples, not just California, which is same climate and many other of the same attributes, but also Germany and other places where renewable energy has been deployed widely and it's worked. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, and I think the long-term policy is the main secret sauce.
Thank you, David. And one last one. And seeing that our fellow Isidro Morales is right here, I'm going to pretty much take advantage of that and ask you, what do you think? Because at the northern border, we have very deep integration in so many ways, particularly social integration. And you have people from California, from San Diego, working in Tijuana, and Tijuana people working in San Diego. You have families from both sides, and they know very well each other, and they work very well with each other, but we do not have energy integration. And what do you think are the major roadblocks and potential solutions, having discussed that probably already with your fellow commissioners, to create this opportunity for regional electricity markets within Mexico and the U.S.?
Yeah. Well, look, I'll put it like this. The governor has, I think, fundamentally two priorities, with his remaining time in office. That's climate change and inequality. Those are the two things that I think really drive him. And so when we talk about energy integration, I think the thing that would make that most likely is if Mexico were actually doing more renewable energy. The cleaner the electricity that's being made here is, the more likely for more integration. The dirtier the electricity is, I think the less likely.
Very good. So if anyone from the audience would like to have a question for the commissioner or any comment? Yeah? Yes? We have one here and one there. Well, they're pretty much.
Really nice talk, very data-driven. I have a question because we've seen a lot of solutions being pioneered by California, but at the same time, like last week, I read on the news that in the Imperial Irrigation District, they slammed the brakes on net metering. So I want to know what your take on that is, and if you have any jurisdiction, and if solutions are being proposed, what are those?
You mean for net metering?
Right.
Or
for non-technical issues occurring in California as well.
Okay, so one thing is your governance of energy I'm very jealous of that because it's very simple. You have one utility, you have one agency. So we have 46 utilities, all right? And so I regulate 43 of them, which are the publicly owned utilities, and it's messy. So there's a state law that says you have to do at least 5% net metering for all utilities. The investor-owned, just to explain, so there's 3 utilities that provide 75% of the electricity. Those are the investor-owned utilities, PG&E, Edison, and San Diego Gas Electric. And so they were just ordered by our sister agency, the PUC, to increase net metering for kind of another 4 years, basically, to continue. The publicly owned utilities are still under another state law that says they have to do at least 5%. So Imperial probably hit that 5% cap. Some of the publicly owned utilities have said, no, this is an economic development tool, we're going to continue it. But our governance is messy. I'm very glad you don't have to deal with how complex our energy governance is. But I mean, as a rule, what's happening generally around the state, I think it's working, and even despite the complaints against net metering, which are very strong from the utilities, every investor-owned utility has been profitable, not just every year, but every quarter. And so I'm a big proponent of this policy because I think up to 15%, once you sort of hit that grid penetration level, the grid can absorb it, and it's actually good because you're generating clean electricity at the point of use. And solar production, and net metering is primarily solar, there's some wind. Solar production coincides with peak demand because our electric demand is driven by the sun. So air conditioning goes up when the sun's out, water pumping goes up when the sun is out. And so having clean energy generation that's coincident with peak demand is a good thing. So we want to encourage more of it.
Commissioner? Do you hear me? Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Ramiro, and I agree with you 100% that the future is the cleaner energy. But I have one question for you. California is one of the strongest and biggest economy, not in the States, in the world. How about Mexico? I mean, if you were hired to be a consultant for the Mexican government, do you give, what is your opinion about the consumption? In other words, kind of a subsidy if I have to build a new home and I have to spend 50,000 pesos for a solar panel. I don't think I can afford that. Perhaps in California it's peanuts, but not for Mexico. I have read that in Germany you get a subsidy for the income tax. What should be your advice for the Mexican government for the consumption of cleaner energy?
So I think the way to think about this, the guiding philosophy has to be sustained, orderly development for the clean energy industry. You don't want to do stop-start, right? And you look around the world at what's happened, like Spain was a disaster. So for 1 year, I think in 2009, they were the largest solar market in the world. They did a huge program. It's poorly designed. The next year it crashed. Okay, that's the wrong way to grow. The right way to grow is have a steady growth, right? Where you were doing that every year and where it's predictable and you provide certainty. So, I mean, if I were, consulting here in Mexico, well, first of all, I would want to listen a lot more. I've been learning a lot this week, but there's still a lot I don't know. But I think you want to build on Mexico's strengths. And I think, for example, the manufacturing sector and the capability here is huge. And so I think the vision long-term of where Mexico should end up should not just be to be a large clean energy market, but to be a large clean energy manufacturer and exporter. And I really think you want to aim for that vision. I mean, right now, you turn these lights on, it's powered by natural gas, and every time you turn the light switch on, you're sending money to Texas. Okay? You're sending money out of Mexico to Texas. Okay? And I hate the Dallas Cowboys, by the way. So this is personal. So, the advantage of renewable energy is solar and wind and geothermal. There's no cost for these fuels. They're free, and they're abundant in Mexico. So I think energy independence has got to be a goal long-term, and being a clean energy exporter. And I think, there's got to be some reform around energy rates. I think when people see no value to the power, if it's subsidized to the point that it's so cheap they don't do energy efficiency, that's not smart. And I think the way, you want electricity to be affordable for people, but the best way to do that is to create incentives and to provide rebates so they're using less electricity, right? So even if the electric rate is slightly higher, but if they're given energy efficiency rebates for high efficiency light bulbs and so forth, where they can use less, that will save in the long term. I hope that's responsive. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Another question? Yes.
Commissioner, thank you for the talk. My name is Daniel Buira from the Mexico Low Emission Development Program. We met this morning, and I think this is a great talk because it's a lot of success stories. It's not just one or two. One that I wanted to ask you about was the bond that you mentioned. Was it 100 million in order to get public buildings to have solar? Well,
yeah, that was done in 2001. It was a $100 million bond. It was a revenue bond for energy efficiency and for solar panels, only for public buildings.
And so the business case behind it, this was a successful bond that has paid back, I guess is the question. And what was the core of the business case? Because I think this kind of model could help answer the financing questions that we're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, the model was just the energy savings that you create by deploying energy efficiency and solar then mean your electric bill is lower, and those savings then pay back the bond.
So it's joined energy efficiency and then solar?
Yes, yes, right.
Any other comment? No? Well, before going to our cocktail and where you could have a closer chat with the commissioner, I guess I would only close by saying that I totally agree with the fact of the electricity rates being transparent and a very clear signal from the market. And if you met with Cesar Hernandez at some point, probably you discussed that already, but I think the key there is also having convinced the Ministry of Finance, because those are the ones that are actually with the a different target than efficiency in the case of CENER with the electricity rates. But clearly that's something that the CREA also has a lot of saying in that. But, well, thank you all for coming, and we can have a closer chat with the commissioner at our cocktail.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was indeed an interesting conversation. And, bueno, a continuación tenemos un pequeño detalle para el comisionado Hochschild. Agradecemos a todos su presencia. Vamos a tener un pequeño cóctel que nos encantaría que nos acompañaran aquí en esta misma sala. Y pues bueno, muchas gracias de nuevo y gracias, Commissioner. Thank you for having this interesting conversation and welcome again to Mexico.
Okay.